We basically provide architecture, design, and construction services for humanitarian projects around the world.
That sounds good, but what's that mean?
Basically, we respond to post-disaster situations. We rebuild communities, and then also around systemic issues of poverty. So helping rebuild an education system in Rwanda, or building youth sports facilities throughout actually sub-Saharan Africa, which we're doing right now. But we also kind of push the boundaries of how we build. So we're not just do-gooders. We actually kind of really test materials. So for us, there is no way to get into Burma. But we have these local chapters in about 70 cities around the world. They represent about 6,000 architects. And I think a journalist, John Hockenberry, once described us as Al-Qaeda for good, because these sleeper cells wake up when something happens and they begin to respond to an immediate issue. So, I sent out a newsletter to our 40,000 plus people, and I said, look, we have to decide, do we respond to the Sichuan earthquake in China, or there's the cyclone in Burma? We don't have the capacity to do both. And one is going to be harder than the other. There's tons of money flowing into China, there's nothing happening in Burma. And of course, no corporation wanted to touch Burma because they didn't want to be kind of politically, it wasn't great. So we used Facebook and MySpace and Twitter to raise all the money. And then we used SMS messaging and Twitter to communicate with teams on the ground. We had a small group of architects and engineers that were Burmese. So they were like, we don't need visas, we live here, right? So they were able to act very quickly. And then we partnered them with our Bangkok group, who then have been going in there and working with the community to build health clinics and community clinics. And part of that has to do with building locally, because for those who don't know, the Burmese government is propped up by Chinese money coming in to buy wood. So a lot of the wood exports is propping up the government. And part of that is if we went and started designing and getting the community to design and build with wood, they actually become a threat to the government and they would be taken down. So actually we've been using bamboo and other interesting natural building materials as a way to circumnavigate, so the government doesn't really know what. Because we were very open, everything's open source, so we were, a couple of years ago, we were the first people to put Creative Commons on a building, a Creative Commons license, which means that anyone can replicate it. Because we were working on the ground and documenting it, being fairly open, ASEAN, which is a big in East Asia, suddenly realized we were in the country doing stuff, and they partnered with us. So the way I look at it is, in the NGO world, if you think design or technology has inefficiencies, spend 10 minutes in the humanitarian world, because it is like a series of oil tankers with no captain, right? People just say, okay, there's a disaster, let's move. And we're kind of like a tugboat. And what we do is we collaborate with lots of other little groups. So whether you've got, somebody was talking about a building system they've got, right? We can connect with these guys, collaborate, and then we just hook onto that oil tanker and move the ship the right direction. So I started this organization 10 years ago with $700 in a website, right? And the idea was like, there was no way to crack the system, so we used technology. And so what I did about 10, 12 days ago is I just wrote a very open reconstruction plan. Like, before you go rushing in there, let's look at 11 different areas of how to rebuild the country. And I put it up on the Huffington Post. And what happened is it went everywhere within 2 days. And before I knew it, I was speaking at the World Economic Forum on how to rebuild the country. I've been speaking with agencies who are in communication with the Clinton Foundation, with USAID, Department of Energy, and I've met with the former PM of Haiti and discussed how this plan could be put into operation, because it's kind of grassroots, and more importantly, it's about economic development and not the kind of hand-to-mouth aid, which is part of the problem of Haiti right now. Yeah, there's a lot of things. You think about the effects of a failed state. I work a lot on failed and pre-failed states, and the effects on security. So for instance, when you have nothing to live for, you've got everything to die for. And so extremism, and certainly in Pakistan right now, we're seeing that extremism in Pakistan, that was not something that, as a manifestation of reading books, or it has to do with when that Kashmir earthquake happened, nobody responded except the extremist groups. They built the schools, they built the health clinics, they became the hearts and minds of the communities that lost everything. So when someone, and it sounds kind of sick, so when someone says, look, you've got 10 kids, you want to give one up for us because we help your other 9 kids get education and healthcare, they will. So you think about, and Haiti is like taking a sub-Saharan country and whacking it right next to North America with all the social ills, and then the kind of political schisms of a broken government. So what does that mean for the security of the United States? It's also there's 4 million Haitians in the United States. There's a deep tie with that. Yeah, I mean, there's something. This is the other part which scares me the most. We're raising millions and millions of dollars to do the rebuilding of Haiti, but the way that we go, if we go in as the white knights, there's going to be a backlash that you will not believe, because Haitian pride is not a phrase. It is like a way of life, and it has to do with the marriage between faith and identity in Haiti. And when you tell somebody, a good example, so we worked in eastern Sri Lanka after the tsunami, and I've had some weird incidents, and one in particular, I was on a beach town that we were working on, and this grown man was literally sobbing in my arms for 20 minutes. And the reason being was everyone kept wanting to give him fishing boats and nets, and he was the master carpenter of the village. And he wanted to rebuild, and nobody gave him the opportunity to rebuild his own village or gave him seed funding to start a business. And that's kind of what we were doing. And he was just like, nobody listened to me. And this is a year and a half after the disaster. You know, he had lost family, and he thought the only thing I can give is my skill. So the way that we've been looking at is how do we create centers that are like we did with Katrina, where any of the community can come in, we can figure out what the skill set is, do some skills training, start micro business. So Clinton made this big announcement with Klaus Schwab at the Economic Forum last week. What they're doing, they're not rebuilding the country. What they're doing is they're saying, look, there's a lot of relief agencies who know what they're doing, they're going in the field. We're going to focus on the economic development of Haiti and create businesses and allow businesses around the world to take a second look at Haiti and figure out a way how to strengthen it. But there's this gap in between, which is building the infrastructure that will allow those businesses to grow. And that you won't have, you know, there are 7 families that control Haiti right now. So if they end up controlling those businesses, will that create equitable standard of living? Or will that just mean a few people will get richer and some people will just get a little bit better? So, you know, they came to us and they said, look, can you help us bridge that gap? And so they are listening and they're looking. What's really interesting is they're looking at new technologies and new ways of communication, because, I mean, I don't have the exact numbers, but the largest consumer good in Haiti is a cell phone. Really? Right? Everyone has a cell phone. If I can SMS messages of how to do earthquake-resistant structures, then I've got impact. And one of the things we've been looking at, and it seems ridiculous, but I'll just quickly grab this.
I'll get you next, Nathan.
So one of the things we did is, we're a no bullshit agency. So we tell all of our mistakes as well as all of our successes. If we screw up, if I've wasted $1,000 of yours, it all goes online. So this basically is it's a book called Rebuilding After Disaster, and it's like a 101 of like everything we did on the Gulf Coast, including actual prices of things, what things cost. Not the thing that you put up there like we're going to build houses for $100,000, and really, because there's no true transparency, it was 180. You know, we've got down to the dollar of what it cost and what the pain points were.
That's online.
It's not online. It's a PDF. So we shared this with about 300 agencies, Make It Right, all those guys. So the thing is, we talked to some folks in New York that said, what if you could take the Kindle or you take the iPad, and I know it seems kind of high market, but you have a content-rich rebuilding that is focused on specific areas. So every NGO, I mean, basically, everybody has a laptop. Every NGO person has a laptop. But if you have an app system that can have plans and drawings, and you can click on it, and it'll do a step-by-step guide of how to do that framing or how to make sure, then you're using technology in a way that really can revolutionize the
Sounds like you need to talk to Kevin Wendell over at the App Fund.
Right. So that's one of the things that we've been playing with is like, part of that 11-point plan, at least 3 of them are to do with digital technology and digital infrastructure.